A number of years ago, I heard a great metaphor for what many organizations and individuals do when it comes to innovation. And the metaphor went like this. Many of us, when we innovate, do little more than pave the cattle track. Now, to unpack what this metaphor means, essentially the cattle track is a metaphor we tie back to the days of setting up new communities, new suburbs, going to areas where there's been no human civilization and laying down the first elements of our structure for our communities, our societies, because typically when you went into a new area historically to build a new town or settlement, the first place you'd put the first road is over the cattle track that had been trodden over the years by livestock. Now the problem with this is, even though there was a path already trodden there, so it was the path of least resistance, of course that's where you put the first track because the track was already there, by simply putting paving over the top of that track, you often caused issues later down the track because what worked well as a smart place for cattle to walk may not be the smartest place for a road to go, because once the road's there, buildings will be built around it, and suddenly you find that you've laid the grid for a city or a community in a way that doesn't make sense and will often constrain growth in the years to come. And so the same thing happens for many organizations. When it comes to innovation, all we do is we take something that is outdated, maybe doesn't make sense, is tied to the past, and we overlay something new on top of it, only to cause issues for us down the track. The question I often ask to clients is this: if you want to innovate in a way that doesn't just pave the cattle track, you need to ask yourself the question, looking at what's already in existence, what are the legacy systems, the historical ways of doing things. Ask yourself the question, what here needs a fundamental rethink, not a superficial retread, if we're going to stay relevant? Because simply superficially retreading something old to make it more modern won't solve the underlying problems and things that will constrain you from staying relevant in the years to come. I was working a little while ago with a group of financial advisors and I was challenging them around this point. I said, what are the things for you that need to be innovated and changed and updated? And one of the things that came up in our discussions was the way that financial advisors often engage with a new client. The first thing many advisors do when they sit down with a new client is this. They want to get to know you, understand what's important to you so they can give advice. So they go through a process that's often called the 10 why process. And here's how it works. They say, so then what's important to you in life when it comes to your finances, in terms of lifestyle? And you give an answer. And they say, okay, that's great. Why is that important to you? And then you give an answer to that question. Then, okay, well, that's great. And why that? Why is that important? And the idea is, the theory is, by the time you get to the 10th why, you're actually somewhere very close to the underlying, genuine, deep-held motivations for that client. The problem is, this approach to getting to know a client can often feel very contrived, manipulative, even patronizing. In fact, it's interesting, I've seen over the years, when my wife and I have sat down with a couple of different financial advisors and we've gone through this process, seeing how frustrated my wife will get as we get to about the third or the fourth why. Now, she's an actor, so I would watch her almost go into character and start making things up. And I was just curious to see where we'd end up as the discussion unfolded. And so I was talking to these advisors about this outdated way of doing things that can often seem contrived and manipulative. And is it time to perhaps rethink the whole way of engaging with a new client? And one of the people in the room said, oh, we've actually found a solution to that already. We realized it was a bit outdated. So what we've done is we've taken the 10 why exercise and we've created an app. So now people do it on an iPad instead. And it was interesting, even as he suggested the idea, I thought, well, I applauded the initiative, the idea to take something and make it fresher and bring it up to date. But in reality, all he had done is pave the cattle track. Take something that was outdated, that was ineffective, and simply bring it up to date and add some new technology overlaid on top. And so the question I would ask you is this: what are those things that don't need a superficial retread, they need a fundamental rethink? And bear in mind, be clear on the fact that as you innovate, as you try to cut a new path and move away from what has been done in the past, many will find that confronting. People will say, well, it's worked for us in the past. What makes you think you need to do it a different way? Don't reinvent the wheel. I love the insight from an American writer and a blogger named Stuart Brand. He said this: if imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, innovation, he said, is the sincerest form of criticism. When you try and move into a new area, do something differently, move away from the established path, the cattle track that's been walked and trodden for years, bear in mind that many will find it confronting. You'll often get attacked, you'll often be questioned, but know that you're on the right track, and it is vital that we don't just find more and more efficient ways to do ineffective things. Paving the cattle track may well work in the short term, but in the long term, it'll cause many more problems than it solves.